All right, so this is the first video for Unit 5. And essentially the idea in this unit is they're kind of flipping the information on us. In Unit 4, the idea was I give you guys information and then you guys provide a graph. Okay, in Unit 5, we're flipping it around. I'm going to give you different kinds of information, such as a graph or like points or other kinds of information, and you in turn have to give me the equation back. Okay, so essentially you're writing the equation based off the information we give you. Okay. So in on the screen right now, you can see a graph. Okay, so I'm giving you guys the graph ahead of time, and if you need to, you can pause the video while you draw it. And the question is, based on that graph, can you go back and give me the equation? Okay, it's kind of like reverse of what we did in the last unit. Okay, again, you can pause the video if you need to draw the graph, and then just press play. The idea here is that we're still going to use this format of mx plus b. It's the nicest, it's the easiest. We've been working with it the most, right? And remember, the idea here is I need two key pieces of information. I need to know what M is, and I need to know what B is. If I know those two things, I can write an equation pretty easily, okay? So kind of going back to something we did in previous units, first thing you do is find the M, the slope, right? There's a bunch of different ways you can do that. Remember, M is the slope, or sometimes we commonly refer to it as the rise over the run, which just means the up and down value on top of the left and right value. Okay. Typically, it can be a fraction, it could be a whole number as well. But remember, the idea here, if they give you the graph, we can actually just count spaces to get the correct value, right? We need the up and down part and the left and right part. So looking at our graph, we need to get from one point to the other point, right? So we need to get from here to here. Now there's two routes you can take, right? One route would be counting up and then to the right, okay? Then we're in a video a little bit farther back, we talked about this. It kind of refers to this as a slope triangle, right? And if you go this way, we're counting spaces, right? So we're going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going up 6 spots. Up is a positive direction. And then I'm going right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, right is also a positive direction. Okay? If you're counting down or left, those are negative directions. Okay? But there's also another pathway that a lot of students have been asking about, which you'll get the same answer either way. You could also travel this way, right and then up. Okay? There's no difference here in the route you take. Sometimes when you're dealing with negatives, it might switch the negative to the other component, but the final actual answer will still remain the same, right? We're still counting right, 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. Right is 4. And we're still counting up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces. Okay, so it doesn't really matter which pathway you take. You've got the same answer either way. The only thing you have to remember is that when you're doing your slope, remember it's the rise over the run. So the up and down part has to be on top. So this part you don't have a choice in. The 6 has to be on top, and then the run, the 4, has to be down below. Okay? And then always double check to see if the number reduces. If it does, you need to do that, right? So 6 over 4, they can both be divided by 2, right? So we can reduce it by 2, and we get 3 over 2. Okay, the fact that it's a fraction is fine, not a big deal. Okay, so that's our slope. I'm gonna put a box around it. That's one of the things I need, right? The other thing I need is that b value. Now, sometimes it's not gonna be very easy to get the b value, but remember the b, what it represents is the y-intercept, okay? So sometimes you can look at the graph and it's actually very nice and clear where it crosses that y-axis. Remember the y-axis is that up and down axis, right? So in this question is actually very nice and obvious. It crossed the graph, it crossed that y-axis right there at -3. So they essentially gave us that y-intercept right off the bat. So we know the b value is -3, okay? Now we have all the information we need to write our equation, and we just write it and then we're done. So our equation is y is equal to our m, which we now know is 3/2, don't forget the x, and then b is -3, so -3. And there's our equation, right? That's the equation for the line that they gave us, okay? So that's the idea with this unit, is that they're going to give you different kinds of information, and you have to take that information and use it to come up with the equation. It's not always going to be a graph, however, okay? So for example, let's scroll up a little bit. I'll leave this up here for a reason. Let me go and divide some space. So let's say we use the same information from the graph. So notice, let me go back to the graph for a second. In the graph, I did label those points, right? 0, -3, and 4, 3. So they could also ask you the question like this, okay? They could say, write the equation of the line that goes through and they'll give you the same information, 0, -3, and 4, 3. So this is essentially asking you to do the same exact thing as the question above. The only difference is they're not giving you the graph. They're giving you the information. They're giving you the location of the 2 points, but they're not giving you a graph, okay? So there's 2 ways you can approach this, right? If they give us the 2 points, we could, if you wanted to, draw your own graph, plot those 2 points, and then you could do what we did in number 1 in the previous example, right? You count spaces up and down, left and right, and go from there, okay? Another way you can approach it without using a graph is, if you guys remember, we did talk about using the slope formula, right? And if you forgot what that was, let me write it down real quick. Okay, the slope formula was m equals, and the y values go on top, so y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. So if they just give us the 2 points, we can actually use this to figure out what m is without doing a graph. So it's kind of your preference. Do you want to draw it, count spaces, or do you want to use the formula? Either one is fine, okay? So remember, the way this formula works is I always tell my students, set it up ahead of time with that fraction bar, put those minus signs in there. Then all you have to do is place the numbers in the correct spot. Okay, so we can label our points, x1, y1, and x2, y2. So on top, our y values are -3 and +3. But notice that the minus sign I put in there in the beginning makes a big difference. Okay, that's why I suggest putting those minus signs in at the beginning so you don't forget about them. And then the x values, x1 is 0 and x2 is 4. And then we simplify, right? So -3 minus 3 gives you -6. 0 minus 4 gives you -4. Okay, the negatives are going to cancel out. And notice, let me scroll back up for a second. It's the same thing as what we came up with when the slope when we counted the spaces, right? We reduce 6/4 and we get the same thing. We get 3/2. So it's just another way to approach the same information, okay? So now we know what M is. Now, for getting B, it's a little bit more challenging when you're doing it like this, because you can't just look at a graph and see where it crosses, right? I'll get into other videos. I'll get into it in other videos of how to find that B value. But in this question, it's not that bad, because if you guys remember, when we talk about B, right, we know it's the y-intercept. We knew it was always going to be 0, comma, whatever B was, right? Well, they actually gave that as us to in the equation, right? The fact that they said the point is 0, comma, -3 is they're telling us what b is. Okay, so it's not always this easy. Like if they don't tell us one of these points is 0, comma something, we have to do something else to figure out what b is. But in this example, we know, right? Because the point is 0, -3, we know that b has to be -3. Okay, and then we can write our equation just like above. Y is equal to 3 over 2x minus 3. Okay, so that's two ways to approach the same kind of question. Okay, you can draw the graph and count spaces on your own, or you can use slope formula to determine the slope. And then again, I'll show you guys later what happens if it's not as easy as this one. Get the b value. Okay.